My name is Susan, and at 67 years old, I thought I had seen it all. As a widow and retired teacher, I believed my relationship with my son James and his new wife Natalie was cordial, even warm. Then my emergency credit card disappeared after our family dinner. The next morning, I stared in disbelief at a $53,000 bill for luxury jewelry and a Bali vacation. On Monday, Natalie texted, "Loved the gifts, mother-in-law." I smiled because the card she used. "Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear what happened when greed met justice." After 40 years teaching third grade in Portland, retirement had blessed me with comfortable days filled with gardening, book club meetings, and volunteer work at the local library. My husband Richard passed away 5 years ago, after a brief battle with pancreatic cancer, leaving me financially secure thanks to his careful planning and life insurance policy. Our only child, James, had grown into a responsible 38-year-old software engineer who called regularly and visited at least twice a month for Sunday dinners. James had always been cautious and methodical about everything, especially relationships. Throughout his 20s and early 30s, he dated occasionally but never seemed to find someone who truly captivated him. That all changed when he met Natalie at a charity gala for the Children's Hospital, where his company donated software services. "Mom, I want you to meet someone special," James said, during our weekly phone call, his voice carrying an excitement I hadn't heard in years. "Her name is Natalie, and she's incredible." 2 weeks later, they arrived at my doorstep for dinner. Natalie was striking with her auburn hair, green eyes, and confident smile. 32 years old, she carried herself with an air of sophistication that immediately made me conscious of my simple home and casual attire. "Your home is so quaint and charming," she said, running manicured fingers along my bookshelf. "My parents have a summer house about this size in the Hamptons. Their main residence in Atlanta is considerably larger, of course." Throughout dinner, Natalie spoke eloquently about her background in art history, her travels through Europe, and her family's long-standing connections in Southern society. James watched her with adoring eyes hanging on every word, as though each sentence revealed new wonders. "My father heads an investment firm," she explained between delicate bites of my pot roast. "Mother serves on several charity boards. They're currently in Switzerland, otherwise they would have loved to meet James already." Something about her stories felt rehearsed, but I pushed the thought aside. My son was happier than I'd seen him in years, and that was what mattered. Over the following months, I made genuine efforts to bond with Natalie. We went shopping together, had lunch at upscale restaurants she suggested, and I invited them for family dinners regularly. 6 months after they met, James announced they were engaged. The wedding was planned for just 2 months later. "Isn't this a bit rushed?" I asked James privately. "You usually take your time with big decisions." "When you know," he replied, squeezing my hand. "She's the one, Mom." The wedding was small but elegant, held at an expensive downtown hotel. Strangely, none of Natalie's family attended. She explained that her parents had an unavoidable business crisis in Tokyo, and her brother was dealing with a medical issue. I noticed she didn't seem particularly upset by their absence. After the honeymoon, I saw subtle changes in James. He called less frequently, worked longer hours, and seemed distracted during our conversations. When they visited, Natalie often wandered through my house, commenting on various items. "What beautiful silver," she remarked, examining my mother's antique tea set. "Is it a family heirloom? It must be worth a small fortune." "My grandmother's pearl necklace is gorgeous," she said another time after spotting the jewelry box on my dresser when using my bathroom. "Will James inherit your jewelry collection someday?" Her interest in my possessions became a pattern. She asked pointed questions about my late husband's life insurance, my retirement accounts, and whether I planned to stay in such a large house for just one person. Each time, James would change the subject, looking increasingly uncomfortable. For Christmas that year, I gave Natalie a silver bracelet from a mid-range department store. Her smile tightened when she opened the box. "It's nice," she said, barely glancing at it before setting it aside. "I usually wear platinum or white gold, but this is thoughtful." Later that evening, I overheard her telling James, Your mother must have quite a nest egg if she could afford this house outright. The jewelry I saw in her bedroom would pay for a luxury car. Red flags were appearing with increasing frequency, but I hesitated to voice my concerns. James seemed defensive whenever I asked gentle questions about Natalie's background or family. I didn't want to damage my relationship with my only child. Then, small items began disappearing from my home after their visits. A vintage brooch from my jewelry box. A small Ladro figurine that had been on my mantle for decades. A silver letter opener that had belonged to my father. Each time I questioned my own memory. Had I misplaced them, moved them while cleaning? But the pattern became impossible to ignore. My lifelong friend Barbara finally voiced what I had been afraid to acknowledge. "Susan, I don't trust that woman. Something's not right about her stories and things go missing when she visits. That's not coincidence." When I finally gathered the courage to mention the missing items to James, his reaction shocked me. "Are you accusing Natalie of stealing from you?" he demanded, his face flushing with anger. "She comes from money, Mom. She doesn't need your things." That night, I made a difficult decision. Following Barbara's suggestion, I discreetly installed a small security camera in my living room, angled toward the entryway to my home office. I prayed I was being paranoid that I would never need the footage. Deep down, though, I feared I had invited a thief into my family. The first Christmas after James and Natalie married revealed deeper issues than I had initially recognized. Beyond her obvious disappointment with my gift, Natalie spent much of the holiday making subtle comparisons between my lifestyle and her supposedly wealthy upbringing. "Our family chef always prepared goose for Christmas, never turkey," she commented during dinner. "And we opened presents in the conservatory with a 12-foot Norwegian spruce decorated by a professional designer." I smiled politely while setting out my traditional apple pie for dessert. Different families have different traditions. I'd love to hear more about yours sometime. "Perhaps next year we could celebrate at our place," she suggested. "Though our condo is nothing compared to my parents' estate. Maybe someday we'll have a proper home." She glanced meaningfully at James, who stared at his plate. In the months that followed, James called even less frequently. When we did speak, he sounded stressed, often mentioning working overtime on special projects. Twice, he canceled our traditional monthly lunch downtown, citing work emergencies. One Sunday afternoon when they visited, I stepped into the kitchen to prepare coffee and overheard them arguing in hushed tones on my back porch. "We can't keep spending like this," James hissed. "The credit cards are maxed out and I'm already working 60 hours a week. Your colleagues have vacation homes, and their wives wear designer clothes," Natalie replied. "You need to ask for another raise or find a better paying position. I can't keep living like this." "Like what? We have a beautiful condo, 2 cars, and take nice vacations." "It's not enough," she snapped. "Not for what I deserve." When I tried to broach the subject with James, later asking if everything was all right financially, he became unusually defensive. "We're fine, Mom. Just normal married couple stuff. Please don't interfere." Meanwhile, Natalie's questions about my financial arrangements grew more frequent and specific. She asked if I had updated my will since Richard died, whether I had considered downsizing to free up equity, and even which bank held my accounts. "I'm just taking an interest in family matters," she explained when I hesitated to answer. "Financial literacy is important to me." After each visit, I found myself checking my possessions more carefully. A pair of gold earrings disappeared from my jewelry box. An antique silver frame vanished from my bookshelf. A small crystal paperweight from my desk drawer went missing. Each item held more sentimental than monetary value, but their disappearance troubled me deeply. Barbara urged me to take action. "Susan, you need to talk to James again. This woman is systematically taking things from you." "He doesn't believe me," I said, fighting back tears. "He thinks I'm being paranoid or forgetful." "Then get proof," Barbara insisted. "Check your camera footage." The security camera had captured Natalie opening drawers in my office when she claimed to be looking for a tissue box. Another time it showed her examining items on my bookshelf and slipping something into her purse. The evidence was there, but confronting her would likely drive a permanent wedge between me and James. I decided to investigate further before taking action. Using skills acquired through decades of internet usage for classroom research, I began searching for information about Natalie's background. Her maiden name was Patterson, according to the wedding invitation, and she claimed to come from a wealthy Atlanta family. After several hours of searching social media and news archives, I found nothing about any prominent Patterson family in Atlanta's social circles. No mentions of charity board memberships for her mother. No investment firm headed by her father. In fact, I couldn't find any evidence that Natalie Patterson from Atlanta existed at all before she met my son. This discovery chilled me. Who had James married? Was her entire identity fabricated? I considered hiring a private investigator, but worried about the cost and James's reaction if he found out. Instead, I decided to be more vigilant, documenting any suspicious behavior while gathering evidence more systematically. The next time they visited, I deliberately left my office door ajar with my desk clearly visible. Inside a drawer, I placed an envelope marked emergency cash, containing only newspaper cut to the size of bills. In my bedroom, I moved my real valuables to a hidden safe installed years ago by Richard, leaving only costume jewelry in my regular jewelry box. As I prepared dinner, the security camera alerted me to movement in my office. Checking my phone discreetly, I watched Natalie rifling through my desk drawers, opening the envelope, then replacing it with a disappointed expression. Later, she spent an unusual amount of time in the hallway bathroom, which shared a wall with my bedroom. That evening, James mentioned that they wouldn't be able to attend our planned family gathering for Labor Day weekend. Natalie's parents finally returned from their extended European trip, he explained. They've invited us to their lake house in Georgia. That sounds wonderful, I replied, noting how Natalie avoided meeting my eyes. Perhaps next time they're in town we could all have dinner together. I've been looking forward to meeting them for over a year now. Natalie smiled tightly. They're very private people. And extremely busy with their social obligations. After they left, I checked my bedroom and found my jewelry box had been moved slightly. The costume pieces remained, but something about the arrangement had changed. She had been searching for valuables again, and finding none had carefully replaced everything to avoid suspicion. That night, I called Barbara. I think you're right about Natalie. I can't find any evidence her family exists, and she keeps searching my house for valuables. Trust your instincts, Susan, Barbara replied. Something isn't right here. I'm worried about James, I confessed. He seems so stressed, and I think they're having financial problems despite her stories about wealth. You need to protect yourself first, Barbara advised. Then you can help James see the truth. I resolved to be more cautious, but still wasn't ready to confront the situation without irrefutable proof. Little did I know Natalie was about to provide exactly that. Labor Day weekend arrived with perfect late summer weather. Despite James and Natalie's supposed plans with her parents, they unexpectedly called the day before the holiday. Mom, good news, James said, sounding genuinely pleased. Natalie's parents had to postpone the lake house gathering. Can we still join your barbecue tomorrow? Of course, I replied warmly. Everyone will be delighted to see you both. Our annual Labor Day gathering was a tradition started by Richard 15 years earlier. We typically hosted about 20 friends and family members for a backyard barbecue with plenty of food, drinks, and yard games. This year, Barbara and her husband, my brother Tom and his family, and several longtime friends would be attending. When James and Natalie arrived, she was unusually attentive and helpful, offering to arrange appetizers and mixed drinks for guests. This departure from her typically reserved behavior at family functions caught me by surprise. Let me help you in the kitchen, Susan, she insisted, following me inside. What a lovely event you put together every year. You must be so organized. As we worked side by side, she asked casual questions about my plans for the fall, whether I would be traveling, and if I kept emergency cash at home in case of power outages affecting ATMs. Each question seemed innocent enough in isolation, but formed a troubling pattern. I keep an emergency credit card, I said carefully, watching her reaction, but rarely need it. My regular accounts serve me well. Her eyes flickered with interest. Smart. Where do you keep it? I should suggest something similar to James. In a safe place, I replied vaguely. Speaking of James, he seems tired lately. Is everything okay at work? She smoothly changed the subject, but I had seen the momentary calculation in her expression. Midway through the afternoon, I needed to run to the grocery store for more ice and hamburger buns. Natalie immediately volunteered to go instead. "You should enjoy your guests," she insisted. "Just tell me exactly what you need." "That's very kind, but I need to pick up my prescription too," I explained. "I'll only be gone 20 minutes. As I gathered my purse and keys, I noticed Natalie watching me from the kitchen doorway. An uneasy feeling settled in my stomach, but I dismissed it as paranoia. Barbara caught my eye across the yard and approached. "Everything okay?" she asked quietly. "Just going for more supplies," I said. "Keep an eye on things." Barbara nodded, understanding my unspoken concern. The store was unusually busy, and my quick errand stretched to nearly 40 minutes. When I returned, James and Natalie were preparing to leave. "Emergency at work," James explained apologetically, giving me a quick hug. "Server crisis. They need all hands on deck." "On a holiday weekend?" I asked, surprised. "That's the tech world," he replied with a strained smile. "Sorry to eat and run." Natalie hugged me with unusual warmth. "Thank you for a lovely afternoon, Susan. Your home is always so welcoming." Something about her tone felt performative, as though she were acting in a play. I watched their car pull away, with a growing sense of foreboding. The rest of the gathering continued pleasantly, though I found myself distracted. After everyone left and I was cleaning up, I noticed my home office door was slightly ajar. I always kept it closed during gatherings. Inside, nothing seemed obviously disturbed, but my desk drawer wasn't fully closed. The drawer where I kept my emergency wallet with identification documents, and my rarely used credit card with a $20,000 limit for genuine emergencies. I opened the drawer and found my wallet in its usual place. Flipping through it, everything seemed in order at first glance. My driver's license, insurance cards, and the few business cards I kept were all present. I reached for the hidden compartment where I stored the emergency credit card, my fingers expecting to meet the familiar plastic. It wasn't there. I checked again more carefully this time, then emptied the entire wallet. The credit card was definitely missing. Trying to remain calm, I thought back through the day. Had I used it recently and forgotten to replace it? No, I checked it monthly, but hadn't needed it for years. That night, I barely slept, debating whether to call the bank immediately or wait until morning. I decided to check my online account first thing to see if there had been any activity. At 6:30 the next morning, I logged into my banking portal with trembling fingers. The emergency credit card account showed 4 pending transactions from the previous day, totaling $53,000. $37,000 at Brilliant Gems Jewelry downtown. $16,000 at Exotic Paradise Travel Agency. My heart pounded as I reached for the phone to call the bank's fraud department. After navigating the automated system, I reached a representative named Michael. "I need to report unauthorized use of my credit card," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Jensen. Can you verify the last 4 digits of the card in question?" After confirming my identity, Michael pulled up the account details. "Yes, I see the pending transactions from yesterday. Can you confirm whether you made purchases at Brilliant Gems Jewelry or Exotic Paradise Travel?" "No," I replied firmly. "I did not authorize those purchases. My card was stolen." "I understand. I see 4 transactions total. The jewelry store charge of $37,000 and 3 charges from Exotic Paradise Travel, 2 first-class tickets to Bali at $7,000 each, and a resort booking for $2,000. The specificity of the purchases stunned me. Not random online charges or electronics that could be resold, but luxury jewelry and a romantic getaway. This wasn't opportunistic theft. It was calculated and personal. As shock gave way to anger, one thought crystallized in my mind: Natalie had stolen from me, and I would make sure she faced consequences. "Would you like me to freeze the card and begin the fraud investigation process?" Michael asked, after explaining my options. I paused, considering my next steps carefully. "How long before these charges become permanent?" "The transactions are pending now. They typically finalize within 2 to 3 business days, he explained. Once we report fraud, we'll cancel the card, reverse the charges, and begin an investigation. Can I request something unusual? I asked. I believe I know who took my card and I'd like to gather evidence before canceling it. Can we leave the account active for one more day? Michael hesitated. That's not our standard procedure, Mrs. Jensen. Once fraud is reported, we're obligated to freeze the account. I understand, but this is a family matter, I explained carefully. The person who took my card is my daughter-in-law. If I can gather conclusive evidence before involving the police, it might help my son understand what's happening. After consulting with his supervisor, Michael agreed to note the account for fraud review but delay immediate action until the following day. He added security flags that would prevent additional charges without verification. Please call back within 24 hours to complete the fraud report, he advised. And Mrs. Jensen, please be careful. Family fraud situations can become complicated quickly. My next step was to check my security camera footage. I rewound to yesterday afternoon during the barbecue. The video clearly showed Natalie entering my office alone while I was at the store. She went directly to my desk, opened the drawer, and located my wallet. The footage captured her removing something from the wallet, placing it in her pocket, and carefully returning the wallet to its original position. The evidence was irrefutable. I saved the video file to my computer and made 2 backup copies on separate USB drives, giving one to Barbara for safekeeping. I tried calling James multiple times throughout the morning, but each call went straight to voicemail. This was unusual for a Sunday, even if he was working. By noon, I still hadn't heard back from him. Then my phone chimed with a text message from Natalie. The emerald necklace is gorgeous. Thank you for being so generous. Mother-in-law can't wait to wear it in Bali next month. Attached was a selfie of Natalie, wearing an elaborate emerald and diamond necklace that must have cost tens of thousands of dollars. Her smug smile made my blood boil, but I forced myself to respond strategically. It looks beautiful on you, I texted back. I'm so glad you like it. When are you planning the Bali trip? First week of October, she replied immediately. James deserves a break from all his hard work. You're the best for treating us. Her audacity was breathtaking. She was creating a paper trail suggesting I had gifted these extravagant items likely to protect herself if questioned later. I saved screenshots of our conversation as additional evidence. That afternoon, Barbara came over to help me plan my next steps. A retired paralegal, her experience proved invaluable. You need to document everything, she advised, helping me create a timeline of events. And you should contact a lawyer before going to the police. I called my family attorney, Howard Grayson, who had handled Richard's estate. Though it was Sunday, he agreed to meet me at his office, given the urgency of the situation. Credit card fraud is a serious criminal offense, Howard explained after reviewing my evidence. The amount involved makes it grand theft, which carries significant penalties. I want her held accountable, I said firmly. But I'm worried about James. This will devastate him. Unfortunately, that's often the case with family fraud, Howard replied sympathetically. Have you considered that James might be involved? The question hit me like a physical blow. No, that's impossible. James would never steal from me. I hope you're right, Howard said gently. But financial pressures can change people, and couples sometimes conspire together. I shook my head firmly. Not James. He's being manipulated by her. You don't know my son. Howard nodded, not pressing the point. Let's proceed assuming he's unaware. I recommend filing a police report tomorrow. The bank will require it anyway for the fraud claim. I'll call Detective Sandra Martinez at the Financial Crimes Unit. She's handled similar cases with discretion. Back home, I began researching Natalie more thoroughly online. Using her image from social media, I performed a reverse image search and discovered something shocking. Before meeting James, she had used a different name, Natalie Colson, not Patterson as she had claimed. Under this name, I found news articles about fraud allegations in Tampa 3 years earlier. The charges had apparently been dropped when the victim, an elderly man, declined to testify. The similarities to my situation were chilling. I also found recent social media posts where Natalie had already begun showing off her new jewelry and hinting at an amazing vacation surprise from a generous family member. She was establishing a public narrative to support her lies. Most disturbingly, I discovered that Natalie had been married briefly before to a wealthy businessman 30 years her senior. Their marriage had ended after 8 months when he accused her of emptying their joint accounts. Again, charges were never filed. The woman my son had married was a con artist with a pattern of targeting vulnerable people, extracting money, and moving on. The realization filled me with both dread and determination. I would protect myself, but more importantly, I needed to open James's eyes to the truth before she destroyed his life completely. By Monday morning, I had formulated a plan with Howard and Detective Martinez. The detective explained that while my evidence was compelling, creating a controlled situation where Natalie would incriminate herself further would strengthen the case. Family fraud cases are complicated. Detective Martinez explained during our meeting at Howard's office. Juries sometimes sympathize with family members who claim there was a misunderstanding about permission to use the card. She took it from my drawer without asking, I pointed out. The video shows that clearly. Yes, but defense attorneys can argue she believed she had implicit permission, especially since she's texting you openly about the purchases, the detective countered. We want to eliminate any gray areas. Howard agreed. The stronger the evidence, the more likely she'll accept a plea deal rather than risking trial. That would spare James some public embarrassment. What do you suggest? I asked. Invite them to dinner, Detective Martinez proposed. Create a situation where she'll talk about the purchases in detail, ideally admitting she took the card without permission. We can provide recording equipment that's more sophisticated than your home security camera. The plan took shape. I would invite James and Natalie for dinner at my home the following evening, ostensibly to celebrate some good news. Detective Martinez would provide a recording device disguised as a decorative item, and officers would be stationed nearby ready to intervene once we had obtained sufficient evidence. I sent a text to James. Would love to have you and Natalie for dinner tomorrow night. Have some exciting news to share. Around 7? James replied an hour later. Sure, Mom. Everything okay? Everything's wonderful, I responded. Just want to spend time with you both. That afternoon, I received another text from Natalie with photos of more jewelry and screenshots of the Bali resort booking. The beach villa looks amazing. Thank you again for your generosity. Following Detective Martinez's advice, I continued playing along. You deserve to enjoy yourselves. Looking forward to hearing all about your plans tomorrow night. The preparation for this dinner was emotionally exhausting. I practiced maintaining a calm demeanor while asking questions that might lead Natalie to incriminate herself. Detective Martinez coached me on specific phrases to use and topics to introduce. The goal is to get her to acknowledge taking the card without permission, she emphasized. Questions like, "How did you find my emergency card?" or "What made you decide to use that particular card?" might work. What if she becomes suspicious? I asked. Stay calm and pivot the conversation, the detective advised. Most perpetrators of fraud are overconfident. She believes she's manipulating you successfully, which works to our advantage. James called that evening sounding more cheerful than he had in months. Mom, Natalie mentioned you're being incredibly generous. I don't know what to say. My heart ached hearing the genuine gratitude in his voice. Let's talk about everything tomorrow, I replied, struggling to keep my tone light. See you at 7. That night, Barbara came over to help me prepare both emotionally and practically for the confrontation ahead. Are you sure you want to do this? She asked, as we set the dining table with my best china. You could just report the fraud, get your money back, and tell James privately. No, I said firmly. She needs to face consequences. If she gets away with this, she'll just move on to her next victim after draining James dry. He needs to see who she really is. On Tuesday afternoon, Detective Martinez arrived with a female officer to set up the recording equipment. They disguised small cameras and microphones as decorative objects around my dining and living rooms. Remember, let her do most of the talking, Detective Martinez reminded me. Ask open-ended questions and express interest in the details. The more she reveals, the stronger our case. As 7 o'clock approached, I took deep breaths to calm my nerves. Barbara had left an hour earlier after helping me prepare a roast chicken dinner that now sat warming in the oven. The detectives were stationed in an unmarked car down the street, monitoring the audio and video feeds remotely. At precisely 7, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my dress, checked my reflection once more, and went to greet my son and his thief of a wife. I opened the door to find James smiling broadly, a bottle of expensive champagne in hand. Beside him stood Natalie, radiant in a black cocktail dress, with the emerald necklace gleaming at her throat. The sight of her wearing jewelry purchased with my stolen credit card made my stomach clench, but I maintained my welcoming smile. Come in, I said, warmly accepting James's kiss on my cheek. You look lovely, Natalie. Thank you, Susan, she replied, touching the necklace self-consciously. Your generosity has been overwhelming. James wrapped an arm around my shoulders. Mom, I don't even know what to say. This is too much. Let's get comfortable first, I suggested, leading them into the living room where appetizers waited on the coffee table. We have plenty to talk about over dinner. As we settled with drinks, I steered the conversation toward their recent activities, watching Natalie carefully. She was practically glowing with self-satisfaction, occasionally touching her new jewelry, as though to reassure herself it was real. That necklace is stunning on you, I commented. Tell me about choosing it. Natalie's eyes lit up. It was absolutely magical. We walked into Brilliant Gems, and the saleswoman was so helpful. I was drawn to several pieces, but this emerald set just spoke to me. She leaned forward conspiratorially. The price was actually quite reasonable for such craftsmanship, only $37,000. James nearly choked on his drink. Natalie, that's hardly reasonable by normal standards. She patted his hand indulgently. But your mother wanted me to have something truly special, didn't you, Susan? And the Bali trip, I prompted, ignoring her presumption. How did you select that particular resort? Oh, the travel agent showed us several options, but when we saw the private villas with direct beach access, we knew it was perfect. Natalie gushed. First-class flights and 2 weeks at an exclusive resort. A proper vacation at last. James looked uncomfortable but pleased. It's incredibly generous, Mom, though you really shouldn't have spent so much. Speaking of which, I said casually, how did this all come about? I'm curious about the details. Natalie smiled brilliantly. Well, after our talk at the barbecue about emergency funds, I realized James and I should be better prepared financially. I mentioned to James that you might be willing to help us establish ourselves more securely. James frowned slightly. We never discussed asking Mom for money. Not directly, darling, Natalie said smoothly. But remember how we talked about needing a break and updating your wardrobe for those executive meetings? I interjected before James could respond. So what happened next, Natalie? She took a delicate sip of wine. I knew you wanted to help us, but might be too modest to offer directly, so I took the initiative. Her voice dropped to a confidential tone. When you went to the store during the barbecue, I remembered you mentioned keeping an emergency card. I thought I'd surprise both you and James by using it for something truly special. The calculated manipulation in her explanation was breathtaking. She was creating a narrative of implied permission, while simultaneously making herself the thoughtful facilitator of my supposed generosity. That's quite an initiative, I remarked mildly. How did you know where to find my card? Oh, I just thought about where I might keep something important, she replied with a casual wave of her hand. Your desk seemed the logical place. And you found it right away, I pressed gently. It took a minute or two of looking, she admitted, apparently not realizing the implication of her words. But once I found your wallet, I figured the special card would be inside. James was looking increasingly confused. Wait, you went through Mom's desk while she was out? Natalie patted his hand. Don't make it sound so suspicious, darling. Susan and I have a special understanding. She turned to me with a practiced, grateful smile. Don't we? We certainly do, I agreed, standing up. Dinner should be ready. Shall we move to the dining room? Throughout the meal, I continued asking seemingly innocent questions that allowed Natalie to elaborate on her shopping spree. She described in detail how she had spent Monday morning at the jewelry store trying on various pieces before selecting not just the necklace, but also a diamond bracelet and matching earrings. The sales associate was so impressed that I had such a generous mother-in-law, she boasted. She said most women aren't so lucky. And the travel arrangements, I inquired. James, were you involved in selecting the Bali resort? He shook his head. Actually, I was at work. Natalie surprised me with the itinerary when I got home. James has been working so hard, Natalie explained. 60-hour weeks, constantly stressed. He deserves this break. She reached for her wine glass. And I deserve to finally enjoy the lifestyle I was accustomed to growing up. As she continued detailing her purchases, I noticed James becoming increasingly pensive, watching his wife with new eyes, as the disconnects in her story became apparent. Over dessert, I decided it was time to begin the real confrontation. Natalie, there's something I don't quite understand. What's that? She asked, licking chocolate mousse from her spoon. Why did you text me saying, "Thank you for the gifts"? If you believed you were acting on my unspoken wishes, wouldn't you have known I'd be surprised by the charges? Her smile faltered slightly. I was just being polite, acknowledging your generosity. I see. And did you think I wouldn't notice $53,000 missing from my account? The room fell silent. James looked between us, confusion evident on his face. Mom, what are you saying? He asked quietly. I'm saying I never gave Natalie permission to use my credit card, I said clearly. In fact, I never gave her my credit card at all. She took it from my desk without my knowledge. Natalie's expression hardened for a moment before she forced a laugh. Susan, we discussed this. Maybe not explicitly, but you certainly indicated you wanted to help us. We never had such a conversation, I stated firmly. You stole my credit card, Natalie. James, she appealed to my son, her voice trembling perfectly. Your mother offered to help us. You know how she dotes on you. There's just been a misunderstanding. James looked devastated. Mom, is this true? Did you not authorize these purchases? I did not, I replied, holding his gaze. And I have proof. I retrieved my laptop from the sideboard and opened the security camera footage. This is from my home security camera during the Labor Day barbecue. The video clearly showed Natalie entering my office, searching through my desk, finding my wallet, and taking the credit card. James watched in stunned silence as his wife's theft played out on screen. You were recording me, Natalie gasped, outrage, replacing her previous sweet demeanor. That's an invasion of privacy. It's my home, I reminded her. And it's fortunate I had the camera, or you might have convinced James I'm simply a forgetful old woman. There has to be an explanation, James said weakly, turning to his wife. Natalie? Her strategy shifted instantly. Fine, I took the card, but Susan has plenty of money and we needed help. You've been working yourself to death while she lives comfortably on your father's insurance money. My father's money that he earned and saved carefully, I corrected. And whether I have money or not is irrelevant. You committed credit card fraud, Natalie. That's a felony. This is ridiculous, she scoffed. We're family. You wouldn't press charges against family. Wouldn't I? I reached for my phone and sent a pre-arranged text message. Less than a minute later, the doorbell rang. I stood calmly. That would be Detective Martinez from the Financial Crimes Unit. Natalie's face drained of color. James, don't let her do this. Tell her to stop this nonsense. James looked shell-shocked. Did you really steal from my mother? I did what I had to do, Natalie snapped, her carefully cultivated persona crumbling. We deserve nice things. Your mother could support us easily if she wasn't so selfish. I opened the front door to admit Detective Martinez and a uniformed officer. Thank you for coming, Detective. Mrs. Jensen, she acknowledged professionally. Is this Natalie Jensen? Yes, I confirmed, and I'm prepared to press charges for credit card theft and fraud. You can't be serious, Natalie said, desperation creeping into her voice. James, tell them this is just a family misunderstanding. Detective Martinez approached her. Mrs. Jensen, we have a warrant for your arrest for credit card fraud in excess of $50,000. As the detective began reading Natalie her rights, she turned to James with tears streaming down her face. "Baby, please, don't let them do this to me. I did it for us, for our future." James stood motionless, his expression a mixture of shock, betrayal, and dawning realization. "I don't even know who you are," he whispered. "Your real name isn't even Natalie Patterson, is it?" I asked, as the detective prepared to handcuff her. "It's Natalie Colson, and this isn't your first fraud case." Natalie's eyes widened in genuine surprise. "How did you?" "The internet remembers everything I said, simply, including your fraud charges in Tampa and the accusations from your previous husband." "Previous husband," James echoed hollowly. As the officers led Natalie toward the door, her demeanor transformed completely. Gone was the refined socialite, replaced by a snarling, desperate woman. "You'll regret this, both of you, James, after everything I've done for you. You're pathetic, just like your mother." The door closed behind them, leaving James and me in a silence that seemed to vibrate with the echoes of her threats. He sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I'm so sorry, James," I said, gently sitting beside him. "I know how much this hurts." "How could I have been so blind?" he asked, his voice breaking. "She never loved me at all, did she?" "I don't think she knows what love is," I replied honestly. "She saw you as a means to an end. Nothing more." James looked up, his eyes red. All those stories about her wealthy family, her childhood, her education, were they all lies? "I believe so," I said softly. "I found no evidence the Patterson family she described exists." "What about her parents in Atlanta? Their Swiss accounts and charity work?" "Fabrications, as far as I can tell." He shook his head in disbelief. "She told me she graduated from Emory with honors, that her father gave investment advice to celebrities." "James," I said gently, "have you ever seen photos of her family, spoken to them on the phone, met any of her childhood friends?" The realization dawned in his eyes. "No. There was always some excuse. They were traveling, or too busy, or valuing their privacy." He stood suddenly, pacing the room. "Our entire relationship was built on lies." "Not your part," I reminded him. "You loved her genuinely." "And look where that got me," he said bitterly. "I feel like such a fool." As the initial shock began to fade, anger took its place. James turned to me with flashing eyes. "Did you have to involve the police? Couldn't we have handled this privately?" Though I had anticipated this reaction, it still stung. "She committed a serious crime, James, and from what I discovered, she's done this before to others." "But she's my wife," he protested weakly. "A wife who stole from your mother and showed no remorse," I pointed out. "What would stop her from draining your accounts next? Or opening credit cards in your name?" He had no answer for that. We talked for hours that night, James cycling through shock, anger, denial, and finally the beginnings of acceptance. He revealed that their finances had been in disarray for months, with Natalie constantly pushing for more expensive purchases while managing their joint accounts. "She always had explanations for where the money went," he said tiredly. "Investments that would pay off later. Temporary loans to friends. I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't admit it to myself." By the time he left my house in the early morning hours, James looked exhausted, but somehow lighter, as though a burden he'd been carrying had finally been named and acknowledged. The road ahead would be difficult, but at least now we could walk it in truth. The weeks following Natalie's arrest were some of the most difficult of my life. Despite the irrefutable evidence against her, part of James still struggled to accept the magnitude of her deception. He alternated between periods of clarity when he recognized the manipulation he'd endured and moments of doubt when he wondered if he'd been too harsh in not defending her. "Mom, what if she really did believe she had permission?" he asked during one of our early conversations after her arrest. "What if this was just a huge misunderstanding?" "James," I replied gently, "she searched my desk when I wasn't home, took my credit card without asking, and spent $53,000 in a single day. Then she created an elaborate story about me gifting these items to cover her tracks. That's not a misunderstanding, that's calculated theft." The bank reversed the fraudulent charges, and the jewelry was recovered from Natalie's apartment during a police search. The investigation revealed even more troubling details. She had been researching divorce attorneys who specialized in high-asset cases, suggesting she might have been planning to leave James after maximizing her financial gain. Most shocking was the discovery of her true identity. Natalie Colson had a history of similar schemes across 3 states. She targeted successful, somewhat lonely men, fabricated an impressive background to match their ambitions, married quickly, and then began systematically draining their resources. 2 previous marriages had ended in similar circumstances, though neither victim had pressed charges. "She would have left me once she got what she wanted," James acknowledged during a particularly difficult conversation. "I was just another mark to her." For nearly 2 weeks after the arrest, James avoided coming to my house. I respected his need for space while remaining available whenever he called. When he finally visited, he seemed older somehow, his usual confidence dimmed. "I'm sorry I doubted you," he said, as we sat in the kitchen with untouched cups of coffee between us. "When you first showed me that video, part of me wanted to believe her excuses." "That's natural," I assured him. "You loved her." "Did I, though?" he asked, staring into his cup. "Did I love her, or the person she pretended to be?" It was a profound question with no easy answer. Natalie's case moved through the legal system with surprising speed. Faced with the video evidence and her documented history of similar behavior, her attorney advised her to accept a plea deal. She pled guilty to credit card fraud, in exchange for a reduced sentence of 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation and mandatory restitution. I attended each court hearing not out of vindictiveness, but to see the process through to its conclusion. James initially refused to go, but joined me for the sentencing hearing. We sat silently side by side, as Natalie, dressed conservatively in a navy blue pantsuit, stood before the judge. "The defendant has demonstrated a pattern of predatory behavior targeting victims who trusted her," the prosecutor stated. "While this is her first conviction, evidence suggests multiple prior incidents where victims chose not to pursue charges." When given the opportunity to speak, Natalie offered a performance of remorse that might have been convincing to someone who hadn't witnessed her true nature. "I deeply regret my actions and the pain I've caused," she said, her voice carefully modulated to project sincerity. "I was under financial pressure and made a terrible mistake." The judge was unmoved. "Mrs. Jensen, fraud involving family members represents a profound breach of trust. Your actions were not a momentary lapse in judgment, but a calculated scheme. I accept the plea agreement, but want to be clear. If you appear before this court again for similar offenses, you will receive the maximum sentence allowed by law." As Natalie was led away, she glanced back once, her eyes meeting James's with an expression I couldn't interpret. He looked away first. Outside the courthouse, James spoke for the first time that day. "I've filed for divorce. My attorney says it should be straightforward since we have no children and limited shared assets." "That's wise," I said, relieved he had taken this step. "I've also been seeing a therapist," he added, "trying to understand how I could have been so completely fooled." "We see what we want to see sometimes," I said, "especially when it comes to love." In the months that followed, I joined a support group for victims of family fraud, discovering that my experience was unfortunately common. The stories shared in that circle helped me process my own feelings and recognize the warning signs I had initially dismissed. "Financial predators count on our embarrassment and reluctance to take action," explained Eleanor, an 80-year-old woman whose nephew had stolen her retirement savings. "They know family dynamics make us hesitate to involve authorities." These sessions proved therapeutic, not just for me, but also for James, who occasionally attended with me. Through the group, we learned about establishing healthier boundaries and recognizing manipulation tactics. Gradually, our regular Sunday dinners resumed. James seemed more relaxed each time, slowly recovering his natural optimism and humor. He immersed himself in work and reconnected with friends he had neglected during his marriage. 6 months after Natalie's sentencing, we hosted a small gathering at my home. Barbara and her husband, my brother Tom and his family, and several of James's close friends joined us for an informal backyard dinner. As I watched James laughing with his college roommate, I saw glimpses of his former self returning. Later that evening, as we cleaned up together, James broached a subject we had carefully avoided. "Do you think I'll ever trust someone again?" he asked quietly. "Romantically, I mean." "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Because you're resilient, and because you've learned from this experience. Not to be suspicious of everyone, but to pay attention when something doesn't feel right." He nodded slowly. I ignored so many red flags with Natalie. Looking back, they seem so obvious now. "Hindsight gives us clarity we never have in the moment," I reminded him. "The important thing is that you're wiser now, not that you become cynical." "You know what still bothers me," he said, rinsing a plate. "Not just the lies or the stealing, but how she talked about you. The contempt in her voice when she thought I couldn't hear. As if you were just an obstacle or a resource, not a person." "That's how predators view others," I said, "as means to an end." "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner," he said, looking directly at me for perhaps the first time since this ordeal began. "And I'm sorry I was angry at you for calling the police. You did the right thing." That moment of acknowledgement felt like a true turning point in our healing process. As for me, I enhanced my home security system, became more cautious about who had access to my personal information, and made a point of documenting my possessions more carefully. But I refused to become fearful or distrustful of everyone. One bitter experience, however painful, wouldn't rob me of my fundamental belief in human goodness. The most valuable lesson I learned was to trust my instincts. The small doubts I had initially dismissed about Natalie had been warning signs my subconscious recognized before my conscious mind could articulate them. Now I listened to that inner voice more carefully. Life continues to evolve in unexpected ways. James recently mentioned meeting someone new at work, a software engineer named Allison. "She's brilliant and kind," he said casually. "We're taking things very slowly." I simply nodded, pleased to see him cautiously opening his heart again. As for Natalie, I've chosen not to track her whereabouts after her release. Holding on to anger serves no purpose in my life. I've reclaimed my sense of security and helped my son navigate a painful chapter in his life. That's victory enough for me. What would you do if someone you trusted betrayed you so completely? Would you have pressed charges against a family member or tried to handle it privately? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more experiences from my journey. And if you know someone who might benefit from this cautionary tale, share it with them. Sometimes the most important gift we can give others is the wisdom we've gained through our own painful experiences. Thank you for listening, and remember, trust your instincts. They're usually trying to tell you something important.